Good evening, Adepts. As members within the Society of St Hydra, we dedicate ourselves to all that has, hasn't, and still might occur. We also venerate the aspects of exploration and the search for new horizons within the waking world, the Mansus, and everywhere else. A difference for us from other occult followers is that our principle does not have a presence within the Mansus generally. Our powers focus on the wake and the multiple pasts we have. We should remember, however, that the invisible arts can be found everywhere, as water is found in a swamp, in a cup, and in the sky. We may not have our own followers, but just as the heads of St Hydra reach in every direction, we can use any law to promote followers into disciples. One notable member of the occult society which studies and documents the 5 histories is Dr. Ibn al-Adim, notable as being a patron who lacks a mortal aspect. As we know, he is likely a long dedicated to the vagabond and is known to research both rose and scale aspects at Hush House. Because of our differences from other occultists, not only can our law not subvert any others, but it also cannot be subverted. Instead, employing the law of the many pasts allows us to find places that perhaps we should not, from forgotten wharfs within the capital to secret cities across the world. Indeed, there is almost no practical use for the law of the past within ritual, except to attract the attention of one Teresa Galmier. Last night, I visited the lodge of the Sage Knight. My hostess manifested as an elegant woman with fashionably short hair and dark glasses. No, she admits, I don't need them any more than I need eyes. Allow me my sentimentalities, but you've come for knowledge, I expect? Here is a story I heard in my Kerisham days. You are welcome to it. Only remember me if you come to make the pilgrimage. She is a fascinating figure, one that is certainly worth studying, and as a name, most likely the Watchman, she is immensely powerful in Lantern. More interesting to us, though, is her pairing with one of the most prolific historians known to us. Christopher Illopoly. Literate, entertaining, bewildering, the only readable occultist, a talented writer, no doubt. A mortal to be as well known as Illopoly must take extraordinary steps. While we may not get the chance to meet Illopoly in person, he is important for us to be familiar with. He is most well known for writing the series Travelling at Night, and will receive his deserved attention later on. An initiate may wonder how multiple pasts are possible. Indeed, the Suppression Bureau would prefer that we stay aware of only our own history.
Oi bruv. Have you got a loy sense for that there history book?
But any who wish to consider themselves as no must at least be aware of the alternatives. It is known that events are different between the histories. What is more significant, however, are the events and places that remain the same. These places represent weaknesses within the fabric of reality. Vienna is one of those few cities which has the same name in every history, although adepts know it as the White City, or perhaps the City of the White. In a snowy street, in a crooked house, in a high and rattling attic, we have learnt that an eccentric hunter of imaginary keys has established a tiny trove of odd books. The location being hunted here is known as the Key Hunter's Garret. This becomes relevant when hearing the exile's description of the city. It was the White City once, now they call it Red Vienna. There's a Legion here, and the scars of the Worm Wars are still visible to those who know. But if I'm to die, I'd like to see the old place one more time. As we know, the Legions are 7 of the names of the witch and sister who were entrusted with holding keys to the Mansus. The Legion present within Vienna is one Clydakos, also known as Frau Schlussel. It may be of interest to note that Clydakos' taken name translates to Mrs. Key. Perhaps the aforementioned key hunter was onto something after all. The most significant location we are familiar with, however, is the legendary Breton city of Caer-Is. Once drowned but now returned on the British coast, under the name more will be familiar with, Kerisham. Drive through the downs to the coast where the grey-green land meets Atlantic grey. Search along the road for signs to Kerisham town. You will rarely find it, even if you have visited before, and its inhabitants guard their secrets with curse and cudgel and fast-bolted door. Caris. Kerisham. Get it? It is said of the worm wars that the first occurred in the 16th century and the second in the 18th century. However, the third has occurred too recently to have passed into history yet. The implication is that perhaps there is only a singular present and a singular future, but the ways in which we have reached this present are what changes. In the Mansus, the hours strive one against another. As the struggles are resolved, they iron out the impossible, exalt the possible, tie the fraying braids of what has been into one golden ribbon of future. Everything is resolved, history becomes the past. There are, however, exceptions. The writing of this future is done through the use of powerful inks, known only as incaustum terminale. The name incaustum terminale is, of course, a Latin phrase. Incaustum refers to an ink used by Roman emperors, specifically the Tyrian purple colour, and terminale is an inflection of the Latin nominative terminalis, which means a boundary or conclusion. As such, incaustum terminale can be interpreted as inks of conclusion, and as such can be used to convince the hours what will become history. One letter, written by a librarian of Hush House, most likely Fraser Strathcoyne, addressed to Christopher Illopoly, tells us such. The incaustum is not what you have come to believe. Yes, it is used to curate the histories, which is why it is so carefully guarded. But it has no power in itself. It cannot change the past. I do not think it is even possible to change the past, not in the sense you mean. There are many histories, as you yourself have written. The hours of the Mansus determine that events are considered a history, and which histories are braided into the future in which you will read, and burn, this letter. But the hours are not all-knowing, nor infallible. I do not think it is even accurate to call them gods, although we so often revert to that convention. I do not believe, and for this I am grateful, that there are such things as gods. They do not take direction, but they have been known to take advice. Now, while we should remember that Strathcoyne isn't the most reliable source, the man thinks he's an insect after all, we can likely trust an ex-librarian to know the purposes of Hush House's most valuable tool. In fact, the purpose of our librarian in seeking their position at Hush House is to shape a future themselves. Further understanding the secret histories requires yet one more layer to be peeled away, to reveal the power of navigation and stories. Rose. This power, alongside Moon, represents the same things that adepts knew as the secret histories aspect. Perhaps the way this evolved is due to how librarians of Hush House are the pinnacle of secret historians, with both mortals and immortals seeking their advice, and this deeper understanding of secret histories reveals the distinction to them. Rose is most heavily related to Fet, the aspect of the soul associated with dreaming, and as such, those with an affinity for Rose are most likely to be talented with horomachistry and nyctodromy. To explain briefly, horomachistry is concerned with the laws of the hours and is related to the librarian's use of inks, amongst other things. Nyctodromy is the knightliest of the night arts, travel through the darkness and the hidden places. Travelling at night is neither faster nor safer, that's why we do it, knowledge of the ways and byways of the transmundane. Speaking of travelling at night, perhaps we should return to speaking of the author of those particular books. Hello again, Christopher. Born in 1889 and growing up in an orphanage in Bristol, Illopoly had his first introduction to the invisible arts in 1903 at the age of 14, when he was adopted by Fraser Strathcoyne. For 4 years, since his adoption from a Bristol orphanage, Illopoly served as Strathcoyne's pupil and protégé, but his relationship with this austere and secretive man was always complicated. His journal confides, "I still think Fraser's intentions are good, certainly he agrees. but I never understood the final goal of his investigations. He was never prepared to enlighten me, and good intentions or not, I can no longer bear this dream of eyes. We have agreed to part, almost amicably. In 1907, at the age of 18, Christopher Illopoly left Strathcoyne's household to study theology at the University of Perugia in Italy, enrolling under the name Christopher Strathcoyne. Illopoly left Perugia in 1909 without completing his degree. He had long lost interest in his studies, and the latter half of the journal is concerned with his studies of Umbrian folk songs and notes towards his own compositions, which are of widely varying quality. One of the better ones, In the Marshes of Night, suggests he visited the site of the old Late Fucinus near Ortuccio. This reference to Christopher's compositions being of varying quality leads into his first publication, Just Verse. Illopoly is clearly more interested in the occult than the aesthetic aspects of the work. By most measures, the rhymes are contrived, the metre inconsistent, the imagery banal. Still, even the worst verses have a compelling quality, and I find myself drumming my fingers on the desk to accompany their rhythms. This likely concludes Illopoly's occult business until the Great War. It's not clear if he served, but around 1916 he came into contact with the aforementioned Teresa Galmier, before her days as the Baldemarian. He must have written his series Travelling at Night around this time too, since he appears especially distracted during the writing of the third entry. Illopoly's disquisitions on fire and the unburnt god are interrupted by passages of distractingly erotic poetry addressed to Baldemera. Illopoly's and Galmier's romance is very prominent. The depths of their affection for each other was unfathomable. That is to say,
without fathom.
The romance ended, much to Illopoly's regret, with Teresa ascending to Long. As we know, Lant and Long do not possess bodies, having ascended entirely to the Mansus, and as we also know, the Mansus is no place for lovers. At the conclusion of the Great War, Illopoly appears to have moved into the Motley Tower at Hush House, while Serena Blackwood was librarian, where he was able to fill it with his own decorations and possessions as he earned money writing and selling his Travelling at Night series. This series focuses on Christopher's own journeys into the Mansus. His first concerns the wood, the second the white, and the third the stag door. The stag door is the stage of the Mansus that acts as a trial for adepts to separate themselves from other dreamers. Only those with strong knowledge of the invisible arts will be able to answer the riddle presented by Gerby, the guardian of the stag door. Those who pass this challenge are what becomes the know. To reach the stag door, I believe that all you really need is to want something enough. But I've never wanted anything that much, except of course Baldemera, and I'm very much afraid that the knot in the story is this. What Baldemera wants is the stag door. But here's something I learned in Persia. Perhaps it'll teach you what you want. This diversion in desire, where Teresa wished to ascend as a Long, is what ultimately led to the pair's separation. Unfortunately for Christopher, while his love for Galmier was returned, it wasn't returned strongly enough to outweigh her ethereal desires. It seems that Teresa is deliberately avoiding seeing Christopher again, which we can see if we visit her in the Lodge of the Sage Knight. I recall my dream. This was the lodge of blue silk, flapping in the winds of the bounds at the Mansus edge, and here was its mistress, who welcomed me as she welcomes all travellers. Company is nice, she confided, but I still miss my Christopher. 10 years and not enough. But we could not have been long together, not without touching each other, and you know what occurs when a man long lies with a long woman. Or perhaps you don't. I hope you don't. I won't tell you. Just in case, I will give you a tiny gift. Despite keeping a physical separation between the two, she seems to have kept watch over him to an extent. Last night, I dreamt of a blue silk pavilion overlooking the cloudy labyrinth of the Bounds. I listened to the mistress of the place speak of other visitors. The Suppression Bureau come here, did you know that? I think they hope to recruit me as an ally. She snorts derisively. after what they tried to do to Christopher, but their folly is your fortune. I will tell you something that may help you if the Bureau ever troubles you. It isn't clear what exactly it is that the Suppression Bureau did to Illopoly, or why it is that he gained their interest. It makes sense, of course. He's a well-known occult writer, and his partner managed to achieve name status. Illopoly appears to have struggled to move on from this. The aforementioned letter sent to him by the anonymous F, who I'm theorising is Fraser Strathcoyne, offers comforts for the turmoil that Christopher must have been experiencing at the time. I am sorry, my friend. She is lost to you. I can offer you only this slender comfort. One that you love has for that which she so dearly wished, and you had your reasons not to follow, and those reasons, I think, are very noble. You cannot change the choices you have made, none of us can, but I earnestly believe that you both made choices you should not regret. The sea does not regret the tide, and after the tide withdraws, something always remains, which we call memory. Speaking of memory, looking at a fleeting reminiscence, its two aspects are Moth and the Secret Histories. Perhaps this is another way the histories are diverged, through the way memory can shift and change. My suspicion, from the level of Illopoly's regret, is that he doesn't wish to change the past only to be reunited with Teresa, but to be reunited with the person he used to think Teresa was. To ascend as a lantern long, human sacrifice must be made to attain the 7 marks of light for an ascendant soul to be capable of leaving their body behind and residing within the mansus. Perhaps it is this that drove the wedge between the pair, and what broke Illopoly's heart, as the woman he had placed on a pedestal had shown an exceptionally ruthless and honestly evil side. If nothing else, we know that Christopher Illopoly lived a long life, though not the immortal kind. The last writings of his that we know of are called the Sunset Diaries. The final entry was written in January of 1982, meaning that at the very least he lived to the age of 92, which is not bad at all for a man who specifically avoided immortality. Last night I saw Teresa. I had not expected it at all. I don't believe that she saw me. Perhaps she wouldn't even recognise me, what I am now after all this time. But I think that she would recognise me. I would recognise her in a crowd, in candlelight, in silhouette, glimpsed in a bathroom mirror, even had she aged these decades too. I am badly shaken. I suppose that the concorsum is the place that this sort of thing is bound to happen. Even now I know the temptation to go to the lodge, to ask her directly, whether she has taken a side, if she still speaks to the Legions, whether she knows where it is. Old man, you're lying. There is only one question you really want to ask. The others are just excuses. It is bittersweet that even after all this time, his feelings never faded. The matters of the Secret Histories are encompassed by what is called the Watchman's Tree, a network of 9 occult libraries. The one we are most familiar with is, of course, Hush House, though 'tis by no means more or less important than the other 8. A library which deserves some special attention for its residents is the Tomb of Lies. The Tomb of Lies is the home of the hidden Serpent Men and incredibly learned Knocklong, the great hooded princes. Before the rising of Rome, the princes warred with the House of Leaf. In the 5th history, the princes lost this war and were doomed to perish, leading them to invoke a ritual of the Spider's Door and escape to join their duplicates in one of the other histories. We can't be sure to which history the princes escaped to, as the act of traversing histories appears to have made the prince's matter of existence a source of confusion. The ascendant priest will experience a vision of the following when attempting to invoke their knowledge of secret histories through a vigil. Great princes lie hooded in garments of striped black and yellow and rich ornaments of gold upon the fields of bone. Their eyes are open to the sky, their scales are scarred and cold. Now at last they are visible, and to look upon them is long forbidden knowledge. This did not occur. When meeting the renegade prince, Arun Peel, he will tell the exile it was nice to see them again, despite being a stranger. Whether his discarded cigarette is fully used or not becomes debatable. Once at a place and time of power and division, this knew the hands and mouth of a renegade not long. In at least one history, he finished smoking it. This state of both being and not being appears to follow the hooded princes. Perhaps this is their curse for having meddled with the secret histories and subverting their own fate. This leads us to wonder, perhaps, at which point the histories diverged. I think we may have an answer, as engaging Echidna regarding our cult reveals. I see we both suckle serpents. As my sister likes to say, Legier remembers. I'll indulge you. Did you ever wonder why it was 5, not 7? 2 missing histories. Well, why only 2? As the phrase suckling serpents reveals, perhaps we should look to the mother of the great hooded princes and whose blood she bathed in to ascend as the mother of ants. On a bed of low dunes beneath a red low sun, a monster wrestles itself while attendants crowd around its flanks. It is flabby and huge, the colour of dirty sulphur. Fanged tentacle necks wrestle like kittens. It tears cheerfully at its own flesh, and the blood that flows is golden. It flops over in a cataclysm of wattled flesh, crushing a knot of attendants, and the others scream and cheer. The 7 coils was the god from stone that held the aspects of edge and knock, and it was with his death that each coil was separated and each thread of history began to unravel in separate directions. To answer Echidna's question on why there are 5 histories rather than 7, perhaps it stems from the unclaimed power of the 7 coils' corpse. From the slaying of the 7 coils, the kernel ascended to be an hour of edge, and the mother of ants ascended as an hour of knock. Could it have been the case that by failing to claim the other 5 sources of power, that they dissipated and became separate lines of reality? As we know, history is the scar on the world's skin. Thank you for attending, Adepts. For more lore, feel free to join the library, at least in this history. What is it that taunts us, guides us, but will never tolerate our failure? It may not be cruel, but it is totally without mercy.